Petra is, of course, the chair of EIOPA, and she's been a strong supporter of this conference as well. Thank you very much indeed, Petra, A, for supporting us in the past, and more importantly, being here today.
Yes, hi, Nicholas. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here. Some of you may know that tech is one of my favorite topics. It's an important topic, and it's always also a pleasure to meet with you, Nicholas, and it's a great start of today. So looking forward to our chat.
Thank you. Yes, and of course you are the FinTech champion also of the IAIS, so the International Body of Insurance Supervisors, which speaks to your enthusiasm to FinTech, as you say. And I've always found our conversations extremely interesting. And actually, not only that, but EIOPA currently chairs the work of the Joint Committee of the three E's. And in that capacity, you've also been tasked with coordinating the work on the implementation of DORA. And maybe we should start with that. I know there was the first hearing on Monday we listened into, but maybe you can give a bit more of a sense of how you're organizing your work among the three ESAs on the implementation of DORA and the role that the Joint Committee is playing in the process.
Yes, happy to do so. Maybe to update you that for the 1st of January, I actually handed over my chairmanship of the ESA coordination to Jose Manuel at EBA. So this year EBA is the chair. No, don't worry about it, because we kept the secretariat and the support for DORA. We started that, and we will continue EIOPA to do the secretariat of the joint committee work for DORA. Also, I mean, we're on it. It's urgent. It has very tight timelines, so we felt it's better. So I think your question is still very relevant. I was very happy with the hearing. I was I mean, not even, maybe even surprised that we had like over 2,000 people listening in. I'm getting actually quite nice feedback also through social media channels, some pointers. So I think that was very helpful. I'm happy that I get the feedback that people have a bit more understanding. And I'll try to share again with you today also on how we organize. And I also look forward to any feedback going forward during our consultation. Now, DORA, of course, is a very, I think, very important part that is going to be a new component in the financial rule book of Europe when it comes to cyber resilience. And it will set rules on ICT management, ICT incident reporting, operational resilience testing, third-party risk monitoring, and it will include an oversight framework for pan-European critical service providers. And that all is new. Moreover, it will make sure that we have more cooperation among competent authorities in this area. And that means not just the ESAs, but it includes ENISA, SRB, ESRB. So there's a lot of other authorities involved, and we need to cooperate, and we will. And for those who are wondering what is the status? Well, the status of the DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, is that it entered into force in January. So it's here, and it will apply in January 2025. And that means that till 2025, we have time to get ready as an industry, but also as supervisors and as the joint ESAs, because there is quite a lot of implementation work that still needs to be done. And therefore, we got some mandates. Now, bear with me, because that's a lot. But Nicholas, if you allow me, shall I quickly run through them?
Yes, I think it would actually be quite helpful. We saw from the hearing roughly how you're dividing up the work, just by which representative from which ESA was speaking to which section. But I think it might be helpful for the sake of the audience to clarify that a little bit. And by the way, footnote, I'm not surprised you had over 2,000 attendees, because DORA brings so many different players into scope, those that are regulated and those that are unregulated. I think it's the single piece of legislation impacting the entire financial service industry, from crowdfunding to sophisticated investment banks. So I'm not surprised at all.
And it does. And if I have to put it very simple, like, why is this a good thing? I think it is because it's a reality that we have more use of IT services and with that other players. so far in supervision, and it really is about operational risk and financial stability. If things do not work in ICT, it has a major impact on the financial sector. So far, we address that through the license, so through whom we supervise, the bank, the insurer, and then through outsourcing, you go through the value chain and you find also the other parties. And with DORA, you actually go directly to these other parties and you focus on the operational risk. I think that is helpful. Now, in order to do that, and for those who missed the hearing and the slides that Nicholas just referred to, they are online. So if you go to one of the ESA's websites or social media accounts or my account, you can find it. But what is it we need to make? Well, first of all, we need to draft some regulatory technical standards, and they will be on ICT risk management, the framework. They will also be on the threat-led penetration testing. They will be on contractual arrangements on the use of ICT service that concern critical or important functions. And then, of course, we need to define what is critical and important functions. We also need to give more regulatory guidance on how do you do subcontracting of a critical and important function. We need to set criteria. That's one part. So that is the risk management. On the reporting, we need to set criteria for the classification of ICT-related incidents. We need to report incidents, but how do we classify those? What are those? What do we think is an incident? We need to also make sure that is clear how you do the reporting on major ICT-related incidents. And finally, we need to look at the conduct of the oversight activity. So how are we going to do the oversight of critical third parties? Now that brings me to another regulatory instrument, which is an ITS, an implementing technical standard, and that we have to develop for the register of third-party information, which also has to happen. And finally, we need to draft guidelines on the estimation of costs and losses that can result from ICT incidents. And we need to draft guidelines on how we will cooperate between the ESAs and the other authorities. So all that needs to happen between now and more or less the end of the year, beginning early next year. So it's a little time frame. And how we normally work and how we will work this time as well is we have a set of work that we will then go out with a text for consultation around summer, and we will have another set which we will consult on at the after summer. So I think that is, if you have, is something to look out for. We need your input, and we will go out for that feedback around that time. Now, what Nicholas was referring to, which you can find it in those slides, is that we, in order to make the work as efficient as possible, we agreed per ESA who is going to focus on which part of all the deliverables. Having said that, that is really just an organizational matter where you have one ESA making sure the process is going, but it all comes back together in our committee, in the joint committee for DORA, which is chaired by one of our colleagues, our supervisory colleagues from Ireland. And through that, it goes back to the boards of the three ESAs for approval. But the work itself, of course, needed to have some work streams. And we thought it was wise to have one person responsible for delivering on time per work stream. And that's how we did that.
I think that is very smart and be interesting to see, because I think as we get into more and more complex issues, cross-cutting issues, that collaboration between the three ESAs, which has worked well on outsourcing and other issues in the past, will make sense here, and I think it'll be interesting to see in the future. I think we will see more of those type of collaborative structures, because I think the legislation will force you to do that. I guess the one thing to add, but that's maybe in the second step, is that you might also have to review your outsourcing guidelines again, the respective outsourcing guidelines of the three ESAs, in the light of ICT outsourcing requirements that might emerge from DORA.
Yeah, maybe going forward, but frankly, if I see what we need to do for DORA already, I think that for now has the focus. But I think in how you see the world develop, keeping an eye on outsourcing and keeping in general, I think the tools, and in our case, that's also legal mandates and laws and guidelines fit for purpose. I think that is something we will need to do continuously. I think one of the other things we also do, and it's part of Torah, but we already do it because we need this. And it follows also from an ESRB recommendation, is that we are also working to build gradually a union level coordinated response for cross-border major cyber incidents that might have a systemic impact. I mean, whenever that happens, of course, you should expect and you can expect that the ESAs will act together with the ESRB and others involved. But based on this ESRB recommendation, we decided to also establish already a pan-European systemic cyber incident coordination framework. So that's another abbreviation that we can add to our EU abbreviation list. It's called EU SCICF. But anyways, it includes designation points of contacts for this for the reporting in times of crisis. And I think this again is I think a very important step in making sure that we prevent, but where necessary, we can act in case of cyber incident.
Thanks, Petra. And I think just to the audience, if you have questions, please do feel free to put them into the chat. But otherwise, I would suggest we move from DORA to the more insurance-specific issues. And I think it was very interesting to see when we talked in advance of this conversation, how you're looking at innovation in helping your supervisors to identify potential gaps and risks in the insurance sector. How you're working on scoreboards and other tracking mechanisms to see how risk is evolving and how the insurance industry is responding to it. And we yesterday heard Lloyd speak about the increasing insurance gap in cyber insurance, for example, but also natural catastrophe risk. So maybe I'll pass over to you on that. What potential do you see for technologies to support you and the insurance industry in identifying and dealing with these emerging gaps?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, because it allows me to say a bit about what we think we can and maybe cannot do, but because we think we do feel as a supervisory community, and when I speak on this is really something I discuss very vividly and also with my board, so the 27 NCAs, and we see these protection gaps. I think it is a key topic for insurance as a whole industry, supervisors jointly going forward. I'm happy the Commission has started the climate resilience dialogue roundtable in last November. And I think one of the roles that we can play, because as supervisors we do have a lot of data, and as EIOPA we have it at an EU level, is to share that back, making use of digital tools. And so I was very pleased that in December, after going through a pilot process, we were able to publish and update and publish our dashboard for insurance protection gaps for natural catastrophe. And it means that online you can find through this tool per member state what are the key natural catastrophes in that particular member state, what is according to our index, how severe is the risk. I think it is key to say here that if the risk score is a bit lower than in other member states, it does not mean the risk is low. It just means that in comparison to other member states, have flooding in mid-Europe, risk might be a bit less than, for example, in the coastal areas, but still it's a risk. But I think this is helpful. It's open source data and methodology, and so I think, and it's out there. I think additionally we want to work further with an open source catastrophe model that we are working on now, and we will release the interface of that model on the May 13th. We will start communicating a bit before May 13th, so you don't forget. But we will organize an event to present it, and I hope it will be useful again to be able to at least have some more insight on where the risks are. And I think in general, what you hear me say is that improving collection of uniform and comprehensive insured loss data, and through innovation, making sure that can be shared back open source in a way that it's understandable and user friendly. I think that is something we will continue to work on going forward.
It's interesting you mentioned open source. Of course, this is a slightly different set of information, but yesterday we had a conversation on SubTech and the extent to which supervisors are comfortable with the idea of open source or not, because you lose a bit of control over the flow of information, of course. But we're not talking about prudential information here. We're talking about pulling together different sets of information that make us collectively smarter. But I think it's encouraging to see more comfort, so to speak, by supervisors to share.
Yeah, and naturally, and you can only imagine the internal processes that we, of course, go through, being very conscious of our legal requirement also to keep prudential individual information confidential, and we always will. I think this is the basis on which supervisors and industry interact. But then still, there's a lot of data out there that is at an aggregate level, that does not fall under that requirement, and that could benefit the industry and consumers dealing with risks.
And I think we will see more of that maybe in our next year's conference when we look at data spaces and specific data spaces or telematics or ESG data. But for now, looking at one other issue, which is in a way trends of innovation in the insurance industry. There are new trends that are emerging. Verena yesterday was talking about chat boxes and the implications of chat boxes, for example, which in its newest articulation, so to speak, is raising new challenges. But there's also technologies that we think 7 years ago were exciting technologies, but now have become quite mainstream and integrated into different processes. And I'd be interested to hear, what you're seeing as a supervisor as some of the new trends or the more exciting trends, but also how you're looking at supervision by mainstreaming some of the technologies that might have been new a few years ago, but have now become part of the day-to-day risk management or client handling process in the insurance sector.
Yeah, and indeed, and we discussed this also when I think we had a nice talk, Nicholas, when we prepped for this session. And of course, I mean, there was this digital innovation, and we all got ready, and now we are a few years into it, and let's be frank, some of these innovations disappeared maybe. Others are there and we're using them, but I don't think they're really that innovative anymore. And then there are the new developments. So what you see, and I think this is when it's helpful that also as a supervisor, you say you are technology neutral. And technology neutral means, for example, that if you set a price or you do a risk assessment, whether you have done that by hand in an Excel spreadsheet using AI or letting a machine do it for you, there will always be the same requirements when it comes to same risks, same rules, same regulations. So you need to be able to show that you have good data, you validate the data, that you are aware of what's happening, etc., etc. Fairness, non-discriminatory. I think all that. So that, and I think that approach so far has worked with new technologies coming in. So what do you see? I think that was out there big time, but did not really fly yet. That's definitely in the DLT blockchain area. It's not gone. I think still, particularly with parametric insurance. So this whole notion of automatic payout of a certain sum in case of an event to consumers. I think that concept is still very much out there, but that needs to further develop. So I think this is an area where you see technology and the idea being out there, but rolling it out, it's still in proof of concept phase. It's still being tried, but I do not yet see that scale in any way or have really big examples where it works. Still, the idea of parametric insurance and having this way of addressing particularly also climate change risk is very much on the table. So let's see how that develops, but it hasn't taken off yet. It's also not gone. If you then look at a technology that has become more mainstream, I think in many ways that's part of what is happening in AI, machine learning, and data analysis. where we see that it's further developing. If you ask me what will be the first part of fintech where you would see more regulation, uh, I already a year ago thought it's AI. Well, in Europe, you see an AI Act coming into being, but also at the IAS level. My fintech group will this year look at what is happening elsewhere on AI regulation and slowly moving, not yet fully moving, but just slowly asking the question, do we need some international standard setting here? What do we see happening? So I think that's logic because it's used a lot and already even in the AI Act some of what is included in the definition of AI from an insurance perspective, I would say that's not AI, that's business as usual. But here you see. Then again, here is also the new hype, of course, with ChatGPT now being all over the news and the question what that can bring. So also at EIOPA, we have some people now looking into it. So within AI, I think we can still see like new innovations, but I think the plain AI and the use of that, I think, is also becoming more mature as we go. And then maybe one final, and if you have anything else, I'm happy to touch on it. But my final would be open insurance. What do we see there? A lot of talk about open insurance, open data. Also, a lot of concerns, a lot of question marks on how we can use it. So I think again, a topic that to me is still innovative. Um, in a way that it's something that we are discussing, but we do not see really happening yet. And at the same time, something to really monitor because there could be really risks in there. But I can say a bit more on open insurance if you want me to, Nicholas, but back to you.
Yeah, no, I think that would be interesting because I think I've listening to you, two or three thoughts came to me. One is obviously as we move to some of these new applications, we still potentially challenge the solidarity system in insurance because if we go to telematics or more detailed information, the risk management and risk calculation becomes much more accurate. But part of the idea of insurance is that we have a solidarity system whereby we cover some costs or risks collectively. There's a tension here. It might be interesting to hear a few words about that. And on open insurance, yes, I can see some of the challenges, but if you look at particularly some of the non-life applications, more standardized applications, I always use my pet insurance as an example. I don't really see why there is not more of a cross-border market for some of these products. And to get a cross-border market, we need to move away from purely embedded insurance products, so breaking up some of those value chains or tied products, and technology can contribute to that. So maybe that's why I see personally an opportunity in open insurance without a radical overhaul of the entire insurance distribution.
Yeah, maybe I start with the latter. So on open insurance, I think indeed, I mean, let's be fair. The insurance market is complex in a way, and it has to do with multiple products. We have even for a pet, you can get all kinds of insurance, and the conditions of the insurance and what is covered is slightly different. So I think that is a reality that consumers deal with. Um, Also, if you already are insured and new products develop, how do they develop? Are you still having the right cover? I think here again there is some complexity when it comes to as a consumer being able to understand what you have, what else is out there, how that compares, and getting that comparison might be very difficult. So I would agree with you, Nicholas, that for such insurances having an open insurance, having data available, even if you would say only among insurance providers, you could limit the risk of other parties stepping in. There's some concerns about that as well. So you could say we open it up to all. You could also say we open it up to everyone who insures, but at least it will then allow the customers to really understand what they have, what they could have, and that is in the buying process, in the sales process when they get it, but also once they have it, at once every time they can go to a dashboard and see what do I have, what else is out there, am I still happy, do I want to switch? So that could be a good reason to have it. I say could be, still hesitant, don't know if that works, if it's really a business model, but it is the reason why at EIOPA we are currently spending this year on actually building a dashboard like that, really building a use case to understand, is this a way we could use open insurance that could benefit consumers, and while at the same time, of course, generating a business model that would be interesting. I don't know about the answer, and we're definitely not doing it because we want to push it. But I really feel that, particularly with technology, it sometimes helps to just build something yourself, to understand how it works, what it can do, also what you need to regulate or what works by itself. So I think that is what we're going to do on open insurance going forward. Um, but naturally, you have to also accept that there are risks when you open up data. You need to understand how that works with consent. You need to make sure that people understand that they give consent. And all that comes in, I think, from the lessons learned that we had with the implementation of PSD2. I was lucky enough to be director of payments when we implemented PSD2. So I also am very conscious of the risks that are out there for consumers. And I'm very conscious as well that payment data are a lot less complex than insurance data. And so you cannot copy paste, but you can learn. And one of the lessons we can learn, that if we move to a space where more data is shared, and if we want to do that efficiently, it would really be helpful to ex ante already make sure we have the lines and simple connections, APIs, that can interfaces that can actually do that. And we do not end up in Europe with multiple interfaces, because that in itself would then not help or facilitate also the cross-border insurance that you mentioned.
No, I'm very happy you say that, because we had a session yesterday on open finance and, of course, also issues around the Payment Services Directive. And we had a discussion about the work that the European Payments Council is doing in the payment space around developing a common scheme on open payments, open finance. And having sat in that group and seen that work, I'm not saying it's 100% transferable, but this idea of a separate type framework in the European payment area concept, whereby the industry collectively with supervisors works on a common standard, as you say, rather than having thousands of different APIs, might be one element that could help here. But I take your point around potential risks, and that brings me to one of my last two questions. One is around supervision and regulation. With the introduction of innovation, continued innovation, you've got experience in this now, seeing this. What does this mean for how Europe should organize its regulatory and supervisory framework?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you constantly need to be conscious of the possible impact going forward on business models. And I think that goes a little bit back to the other question you asked me about. How does that work with more data being available, more accurate risk assessments being possible, and then the pooling of risks? That question has come up already many times, and so far I still see that the role of insurance and the ability to pool risk is very much needed. I also see there is a need in society to pool those risks. You see that now in the whole discussion about right to be heard, that there is also in society a push, and of course that's not always an easy discussion, because you have insurers who need data to do a proper risk assessment, but you already see society realizing that a lot of data might actually end up in people being left out. So I think that discussion is already happening. But I think here in itself, what is possible from a technological perspective, I always think needs to be combined with what society will accept. So I think here, this is what you need to monitor also as a supervisor, but you need to be conscious of business models potentially changing. And so think forward and thinking scenarios also in supervisors to be able on what to deal with. Now, what that then also means from regulatory and supervisory frameworks is that principle base really helps. If you say same risks, same rules, same regulation, technological neutral, and you start from there, then again, as I said at the start, whatever tool was used, in the end, there are just certain rules and certain levels of quality that needs to comply with. And we need to realize that it's not just a financial sector anymore. We see that with DORA, where we need to work with other authorities, but you see that also in the data space, where you will need to work with the data protection authorities. You need to be conscious of GDPR. So what it requires, indeed, is also a more horizontal view on whom to work with and whom to interact with as supervisors, to make sure that you bring together what is necessary for consumers, but you also keep it efficient for industry.
Yeah, and I think if I look at some of the developments like the AI Act, we discussed this a year ago, about treatment of life insurance, for example, as high risk.
Yeah.
What we're seeing in parts of the European Parliament calls for telematic data not to be used for the calculation of premiums for motor insurance, for example.
Yeah.
It touches on exactly these issues that you've raised.
Yeah.
Maybe a last, no, go, please respond, yes.
Oh, it does, and I think what we can do here as an industry and as supervisors is, I think many of the proposals made outside of what is our usual circle of the financials, also in Brussels, I think they are really the proposals come really up from a good thought, from almost always from a concern, a need to support consumers, etc. But often it is not coming from a part where it's a lot of knowledge on what insurance does, and already also how regulated insurance already is. So I think we need to recognize the concerns, because I think often the concerns that they want to address are fair. But then we need to, I think, liaise and through more interaction, explain and share that we also have that concern, that is why we actually supervise, and that some of these concerns should already have been addressed in supervision. Now, if that is insufficient, then let's work on that. So I think here we can find each other as well, because I think the reason why some proposals come up are good reasons, but there is also not always an awareness of what insurers do, but also what insurance supervisors are already doing.
I think you put that very nicely, because that is part of the challenge of connecting the different policy streams at the European level and connecting them. And that's partially the role of all of us to try and bring this together, but it's not easy, as you say. Last question is on the international dimension. And you mentioned already that you will work on bringing together best practice in artificial intelligence at the level of the IAS. I took note of that, very interesting. But how else are you working together, and what role do you see for the collective work at the global level around some of these challenges that we're facing around the introduction and adoption of new technologies?
Yes, well, as I said, first of all, on AI, of course, we are going to work further to explore what is happening there already on the regulatory part and what may be needed going forward. Moreover, we have in my group, we have other work streams, the distributed ledger technology work stream in blockchain, which will continue to be monitoring use cases and examples that are out there, and focusing a bit more again on parametric insurance and what is happening over there. And also we will further work on the use of application programming interfaces, so APIs, and open data, and how what is happening there in the different markets. And why my group is called a forum, and I'm not called a chair but a champion, is that the idea is this is not a policy drafting committee of the IAS. And the IAS, International Association of Insurance Supervisors in Basel, is a standard setter, worldwide standard setter, and they have official committees that draft these standards. This group is not doing that. This group is really bringing supervisors together, and also the tech part, so the staff, the experts in the supervisors worldwide that work on tech. And that makes it a very nice group. And we exchange what we see happening, and where we can either learn from each other, or we see same developments in different parts of the world. We try to bring that together. Now, to the extent possible, we also share that with the outside world. We published a summary in December 2022, but there are much more extensive reports going to all the supervisors at the international level. And there are, I think, a lot of interesting things happening. everywhere in the world. So we can learn from what is happening in Asia. We can also learn from some initiatives that are undertaking currently also in parts of Africa, where through digital tools, investors and insurers are working together with farmers, because investors would be interested in investing if they also know there is insurance cover. So here, the Access to Insurance Initiative is trying to bring together these parties to see through digital platforms how you can bring these parties together to actually, yeah, bring financial services to several parts of the world. Now, I'm not saying that that is immediately relevant for the European Union, but I do feel that in some of these parts of the world is technology being used, and combinations of parties and technology being put into use that we could also learn from. And I think that is why this group is so interesting. And wherever we find a topic where we feel more is needed, like this year, probably AI at the end of the year, I can imagine that we would say more is needed. Then we will hand it over to the proper standard setting committee that then can draft and present something to the executive committee. And I'm on there as well, so it will come back.
Yeah, give your colleagues a chance to finish the international insurance standards first before you give them extra homework. But I think you make a really good point, because also around financial inclusion and microinsurance, for example, technology can play an important role. And Africa and parts of Southeast Asia are good examples. And we're looking at it even now in the Ukraine and some of the agricultural communities to allow them to continue their activities. So thank you very much indeed, Petra, for being with us and kicking us off this morning with a very thought-provoking and interesting exchange as always. I always enjoy this a lot. Thanks for being with us, and hopefully see you at our next conference and maybe even in person.
That would be nice. Wish you a great day, and thank you for having me.
Not at all. Great pleasure. Thanks, Petra.